Hi, my name is Easton Lewis, and today I'll be discussing Chapter 7, which is Ethics, Social Responsibility, and the Business Manager. At the beginning of this chapter, it describes what ethics and business ethics are. Ethics is a study of what makes up good and bad conduct, exclusive of related actions and values. Business ethics is a study of what makes up good and bad conduct as related to business activities and values. The chapter continues to describe what social responsibility of business is. And this is a concern of business entities about profit-seeking and non-profit-seeking activities and their unintended impact on others directly and indirectly involved. Businesses are required to be socially responsible due to the following factors. One, the complexity and interdependence of society. Two, political influence that translate public outcry into government regulations. And lastly, the philosophical differences over the role of businesses. The chapter continues with listing the theories of the ethical thought. And one of these theories is a consequential theory. And this theory describes that acts are judged good or bad based on whether the acts have achieved their desired results. The next theory is the deontological theory. And this is when actions can be judged good or bad based on the rules and principles that are applied universally. And lastly, the third theory is the humanist theory. And this theory states actions are evaluated as good or bad depending on whether they contribute to improving inherent human capacities such as intelligence, wisdom, and self-restraint. The chapter goes on to describe the various code of ethics. And to list the first code of ethics is the individual code of ethics. And in the individual code of ethics, values are adopted from parents, religion, peers, teachers, siblings, and the environment. Business managers face conflict between individual ethical values and corporate values. The next code of ethics that comes along is the corporate code of ethics. And this introduces the corporate culture. And the corporate culture is the evolution of production and marketing emphasis over corporations' early years. The codes of conduct that applies in the corporate codes of ethics is to apply to upper and middle level managers, implemented by the chief executive officer, and lastly, establish sanctions for deviant behavior. Continuing with the corporate code of ethics, it describes the forbidden actions that's forbidden in this ethics. And for one, paying bribes to foreign government officials is not approved. Two, fixing prices. Three, giving or accepting gifts from suppliers or customers. Four, using insider information. And lastly, revealing trade secrets is not permitted. And to continue lastly with the corporate code of ethics is the Sarbanes-Oakley Act. And this act requires publicly traded companies to set up confidential internal systems. Employees can report breach of ethics or conduct, and it provides protections for whistleblowers. Excuse me. And the next code of ethics is the industry code of ethics. And this is presented by a hybrid model. In this model, you must be honest and fair dealings with customers, acceptable levels of safety, efficiency, and cleanliness, and non-deceptive advertising, and lastly, maintenance or experienced and trained personnel compete performance of services and furnishing of quality products. Firms have their own self-regulating organizations in this code of ethics as well. Next is the professional code of ethics. And in this form of ethics, the criteria for defining professionals is listed as mandating university education training before licensing and continuing education requirements, licensing examination requirements, written ethical standards that is recognized and continually enforced by the group, and formal association or group that meets regularly, independent commitment to the public interest, and lastly, formal recognition by the public as a professional group. The membership within this ethics is with the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and is suspended for reasons such as a felony as defined under any state law, willful failure to file an income tax return with the CEPA as an individual is required to file, filing of fraudulent return of the part of the CPA for his or her own return or that of a client. And lastly, aiding the preparation of a fraudulent income tax return of a client. And then lastly, with the Professional Code of Ethics is the AICPA division for the CPA firms requires firms to adhere to quality control standards, submit to peer review of their accounting and audit practices every 3 years, ensure all professionals participate in continuing educational programs, and lastly, maintain minimum accounts of liability insurance. The chapter also lists the schools of social responsibility, and one of these schools is a profit-oriented school. And in this school, business entities are distinct organizations in our society whose sole purpose is to increase profits for shareholders. The next school is the managerial school. And this school, advocates of this series, argues that business entities have a number of groups that they must deal with. They include not only the stockholders, but also employees, customer, activist groups, and government regulators, all of whom who may make claims on their entities' resources. And the last school of the social responsibility is the institutional school. And in this school, business entities have a responsibility to act in a manner that benefits all of society. Lastly, the chapter goes on with the code of conduct for transnational corporations. And it lists the professional obligation school. And in this school, business managers and members of the boards of directors must be certified as professionals before they assume managerial responsibilities. They must also have responsibility to the public interest beyond making profits. And the next school in the code of conduct for transnation corporations is a regulation school. And in this school, all business units are accountable to elect officials. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. And then continuing on with the code of conduct for transnational corporates, it lists, for one, that respect for national sovereignty and country where a company operates, 2, adheres to social cultural values, 3, respect for human rights, and 4, abstination for corporate practices. And that's all I have for this chapter. I thought this chapter was really interesting because you learn all the various codes of ethics and values. And I thought this was interesting because, everyone has their own view and their own ethics that they believe in. And seeing that tied in with businesses and how business have their own ethics, I thought was really interesting. So I can't wait to continue to the next chapter. Thanks.